Hello and welcome back to the Majority Show, broadcast every week on every Wednesday at 7 p.m. I'm your host, Mark Devlin, and this is Scotland's #1 anti-national show. I'm here tonight with a co-host, Mary Devlin, who most of you already know, and Naveed Ashgar, who is the Deputy Chairman of Glasgow Conservative and Unionist Association.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
And hello, everybody. Good evening.
Great to have you with us. We'll be talking with Naveed a little bit more when we get the show going. So tonight I'll be talking with Naveed about Tory strategy and what's going on in Scotland and Glasgow.
And I'll be reporting on why the Greens have got to go.
Well, we all know that anyway. And we'll all be discussing the latest developments in the SNP leadership contest.
And of course, we have Zoomer of the Week.
Right. And Mary, you're going to be doing the chat today?
I'll be handling all your comments tonight. So if you can please try to keep them short, and I'll get as many up on the screen as I possibly can. Thanks.
Right. Well, so we'll be back in a moment. Right, welcome back. We'd like to Scotland's #1 anti-nationalist show. Hello there, see messages are coming in. Hello to everyone, Heaven Malbec, Alan Jack, no, Alistair Jack, and the rest of the gang. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Before we start, huge thanks to our friends at UK Union Voice and United Against Separation, who host the show on their Facebook pages, and we are very grateful that they do so. Also, please do remember to subscribe on YouTube. That's what we would like you to do. It really helps us a lot. Well, tonight, our special co-host is Naveed Ashgar, Deputy Chairman of Glasgow Conservative and Unionist Association. Hi, Naveed. Thanks for coming on to the show.
Thank you very much, Mark, for inviting me on, and yourself, Mary, as well. We had met recently, and I'm really glad to get on and talk about all things not independence.
Well, unfortunately, we'll be talking quite a lot about independence, or at least the lack of it. Anyway, we did actually meet up, and we have some of you may know, your viewers may know, we have a weekly meet-up in Glasgow, and we invite people from different parties to come along and talk to us. Naveed came along and talked to us about what he was doing, and then we had the pleasure of having that meeting promoted in the national newspaper, which was
big news.
Big news, of course. Whenever we meet with anyone interesting, it's always big news. So, Naveed, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So myself, born and bred in Glasgow, lovely West End. I went to school and university in Glasgow. I have background in business. Currently, I'm working at the Scottish Parliament with the Conservative group with one of the MSPs as a communications and engagement officer. One of my voluntary roles is deputy chair at Glasgow Conservative, so which means that we're out and about campaigning, supporting candidates, councillors, MSPs, putting out leaflets, surveys to the door, talking to people, engaging with people, companies, organisations, and telling them about the alternative to the SNP and why independence is not good for Scotland. And I think that needs to be done at grassroots level, because, people talking from the top down doesn't always get into the minds of people. But when you're having a general chit-chat with people, they actually listen to you more. And that, I think, is so important for, people of a unionist nature to be doing that with people.
So what kind of reaction have you been getting from people on the street?
Well, let's not beat about the bush. When things happen down south, which within the party, they do affect us up and down the country, and it makes people think, oh, look, Boris Johnson's done this, or the Prime Minister's done this, and this Minister's done that. It takes away from the good work that it takes away from the good work that people are doing. Mm-hmm. But recently, with the hard work that Scottish Conservatives have done on the gender reform bill, for example, that has shown that the Scottish public were with us on that. And, even after the results of the Section 35 came from the government, it showed that the Scottish public really, really agreed with us. And the amount of letters and support that our party got from that was that we were on the right side of history on that. And even now with we're going to touch upon this going forward with what Kate Forbes said to Hamza yesterday about the disaster and every single thing that he's done. That shows you that the things that we've been talking about at the Scottish Conservatives, about standard things in life, about the cost of living crisis, about energy, about schools, hospitals, roads, the things that affect us day in, day out, that's what's important, and not harping on about independence 24/7 to hide, the disasters that they have been.
Yes, of course. I
doing
mean,
in all these other
completely
departments.
agree with that. Right. So, but okay. So we know the headlines are full of the Labour Party is going to win the next general election, and I'm sure that and Rishi Sunak, has he been able to change that in any way, in your opinion?
Absolutely. Do you know the one thing about Rishi is he's shown to be a really good administrator. Inflation has been down 3 months in a row, which is one of the key things. We're getting crippled every time you go to the shops. I'm telling I'm a family man. I've got 3 kids. Every time you go to the store, prices are up. Your same shopping bill is every time you're in, it's up. But we're getting a wee bit of a respite now. Inflation's slightly coming down. The fuel prices at the pumps are down, and hopefully gas and energy prices will come down slightly. So we are getting there. And as long as there's no major scandals, I think Rishi will do something over the next couple of years. I think he's the right man for the job.
Yeah, well, I think it's quite interesting actually when you mentioned that. We talk about the cost of living crisis, inflation, all huge issues when, just let's say, Liz Truss became Prime Minister. Those aren't such big issues anymore. Of course, new things will come up. I think many Conservative voters are concerned about illegal immigration. And
we have a comment here from Daz Fulton who's saying, "Stop the boats and Conservatives will win the next election."
Well, they did come up. They did appear today with the "Stop the Boats" on the lectern, and some people have said pasted in Nicola Sturgeon's picture in there and saying she's been stopping the boats in Scotland for long enough. No, of course, referring to the Ferguson Marine and the ferries. But do you think that it's possible for Rishi Sunak to turn the ship?
To give you a number and figures, right? Just over 42,000 people crossed on small boats last year. 42,000 people. You couldn't count them in a line. It's the size of an average size football stadium, right? I mean, where are we supposed to house people? Where are we supposed to feed them, get jobs for them, get schools for them, get hospitals for them, and that already creaking infrastructure that we already have? And Scotland and the SNP are always the first to wave the flag of everybody come here, everybody come here. They can't provide for the people that live here. How can they provide for more people? Let's get the things in order first before we start welcoming other people. Now, we understand that we have a duty as a first world nation to protect those who are suffering real hardships, but it's all young men that are coming on those boats, and I'm sure some of them may be suffering persecution in their own lands and they come over, but they have the proper channels to do that, to go to embassies or go to places to come the proper way. So I think harsh steps have to be taken, and the things like Rwanda, I know they don't sound great, but unless we put harsh steps out and ensure that when they come here, they don't have the opportunity to apply for asylum, they don't have the chance of getting citizenship and passports, that will then stop people doing that, because a lot of them are just economic migrants. Now, I'm not saying everybody is, I don't want to take my words out of context, but many of them are economic migrants.
Well,
just before we go on, these people that are coming on these boats, do we know if they have criminal records? Are they murderers? Are they rapists? What is their past? We know nothing. At least when they come to the proper channel, there's a certain amount of checks.
Lee Anderson just said that the other day. He said, well, if you were legit, why don't you just go on a Wizz Air flight from Albania to the UK? So, but, it's a complex issue, and I think there is some frustration on the part of Conservative members. Now, I'm actually not sure if Rishi Sunak does turn it around. On the other one, of course, is the Northern Ireland Protocol, which we won't go into in this show. It's just far too complex. But that's the thing. I think part of it is that these issues are very complex, and people do want easy solutions. They're just like, why don't you stop the boats? Why we'll turn them around, whatever it is. It's not as simple as that. I think if there was a way forward, that it would have been done by now. So, but even that I think that once it is done, perhaps it might be out of the consciousness a little bit, and a bit like the cost of living crisis, kind of like not fading, but it's not quite as intense as it was, especially with the energy crisis and so on. Who knows? So, talking about stuff that you're doing specifically in Glasgow, or in Scotland, actually, how the Scottish Conservatives and the Glasgow Conservatives going?
So, for example, at the last Scottish parliamentary elections, we took 31 seats. And if you read all the polls just before the election, they had us down to 20 seats as the third party, 21 seats, 26, 27. The polls were all over the place. Nobody had us at the same figure as the previous election. And you know what? We managed to take 31 seats, which shows that there is a unionist support in Scotland, and the Conservatives are seen as the correct party to lead that. Labour, being a unionist party, they're too soft. They were in power sharing with 6 councils in the last before the current council elections, and you can see even within Parliament they supported the SNP on the gender recognition bill as well, which they've been really slated for. So I think Labour are soft, and I think come the general election coming forward, if Labour can't get the seats that they need to run the UK government on their own, I think they're going to do a power share with the SNP, because without that, they might not be able to get through.
I don't think that. I don't think that will happen. I think the idea that they could do that is a kind of death sentence for Labour, especially in the wider UK. I think Labour has, to their credit, has firmed up their stance on the union. I mean, they were never really a pro-independence party to begin with. But they have firmed it up. I think Anna Sarwar, not so much Anna Sarwar. I mean, I think certain people in the party have been able to firm up their support much better. What we want as a majority, as our group, is that we want Labour and all the normal parties to be fighting with each other, and that's what we want. We want to get rid of nationalism so that can resume. So we support a strong Labour just as much as we support a strong Conservative Party or even strong Lib Dem parties, as long as they're strong and they are making the right noises to get rid of the SNP. We're for that. And just to mention that, for example, in a few weeks we're going to have Ben Proctor, who is part of Scottish Labour's National Executive Committee, to come on to talk about how Labour is approaching these issues as well. So
I agree with you, Mark, on that. I think there's nothing more than what we would like to have a strong Labour Party in Scotland. The collapse of Labour has led to the rise of the SNP. So Labour and SNP have a vote bank which kind of intermatches, depending on what's going on. We don't get any of the SNP voters. An SNP voter will, tick the box in number 2 or number 3 to a Labour candidate, but they will never do that to a Tory candidate. And same with a Labour voter, they will also tick a second or third. I've been to many counts and I've seen all the forms that come in, the vote forms, and many a time there's cross-reference between the two parties. So this is where Labour needs to really pull out and make a strong point about their unionist credentials, and that would support the Conservatives in ensuring to keeping the SNP out of power. And you know what would happen? They wouldn't be able to have a majority, or they wouldn't need a majority. They'd be trailing, and they'd have to do deals and partnerships with other parties through individual bills, and that's where it needs to be.
And that's the way it should be.
Well, perhaps that's the way it should be, and that's the way the Parliament was set up to be in the beginning. So do you have any, just to wrap up this section, do you have any particular hopes for the Scottish Conservatives going forward in these next few months and before the general election?
Absolutely. I think as a party, we are looking to, we're really rejuvenated with all the recent goings on. And I think it's shown that the party does have the support. We just need to get out and talk to people and tell them about our policies. And the thing is that we're supporting people and we don't have another agenda. And, the Scottish Party, although connected to the English Party, is an individual party. We are running Scotland from Holyrood, and the MSPs are on the ground here, the councillors are on the ground here, and I think the Conservative voters have to realise that if they don't support the Conservatives when it comes to the polling, they will end up with a majority with the SNP again, and this will just be a circle. It just goes round and round and round.
Well, we do live in interesting times, so we will see how that goes. Now, we're happy to have you on tonight, so we're co-hosting. So you're welcome to, I'll be asking you questions all through the show, and you're welcome to ask anything as well, or put your points forward.
Yeah, please just jump in.
So we will be back in a second, where we'll be talking about the SNP leadership bin fire. Okay, back in a second. Right. I should make those longer so we can have a bit more of a rest.
We could have a wee tea break.
But anyway. Right. Okay. So last night, there's no doubt that Kate Forbes got the best sound bites out of the debate. Let's look at the main one here. Of course, we've all seen this, but why not?
Very much. Well, Humza, you've had a number of jobs in government. When you were Transport Minister, the trains were never on time. When you were Justice Minister, the police were strained to breaking point. And now, as Health Minister, we've got record high waiting times. What makes you think you can do a better job as First Minister?
Oh, burn.
Oh, yes. I mean, that was the big one, big moment there. And let's see, Mary. Okay, it was quite spicy.
It was spicy.
Does it change the dial?
Well, it was spicy indeed. Well, obviously, Kate is trying to brand herself as the competent choice, especially when it versus Humza. She's trying to very much show up his incompetence, which we all know about. But I don't really get it because, if the SNP membership wanted competent governance, they wouldn't be voting SNP, would they?
Okay, well, I suppose that is very true.
So I would actually say that was probably, you've got the three candidates. You've got Kate, who's going on the competence. We've got Humza, who's putting himself out there as the continuity candidate. And then you've got Ash, who's like, we'll just go ahead with our own independence anyway, regardless of anyone else.
Yes. Well, I think
I think, to be honest, I'm not an SNP member, so it's very difficult for me to think like an SNP member. But I would say that probably the competence part is maybe one of the less favourable character
I think
traits.
that's the thing. I mean, of course, Kate Forbes has some other issues as well. Certainly, she's not a favourite of the progressive wing of the party due to her views on gay marriage and so on. And also, perhaps she's not a friend to anyone who wants not necessarily competence, but financial who doesn't care about the money. Right, who doesn't actually care about the reality of money in Scotland? I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? In the sense of competence, they want. We said many times that they would like to be kings of the ashes. It doesn't actually matter if there's a thriving and prosperous Scotland for many of the nationalists, as long as it's free. Then you say to them, okay, well, what about the deficit? And you're like, I know, we don't even care about that, or they make up some misdirection or something that doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter to a lot of those. So there are quite a few people in the SNP, or who at least vote SNP, maybe not quite so much interested in independence, although of course it's still there, but do want competent governance. I mean, there's some of them, right? There's a kind of...
you would hope that there would be some people who would like the country to be governed
those
well.
people were interested in... Those people voted for Nicola Sturgeon, and to some extent, it's Nicola's personal brand. I mean, do you have any thoughts on this, Naveed?
Absolutely. But Mark, before we go on, what did you think of Humza's insinuation about Kate being essentially a right winger in their party? The media's called her tartan Tory.
Yes.
Her husband's a Tory, so do you think she has this kind of background in her head?
Well, I think this is one of the issues with nationalism. Basically, nationalism is a kind of catch-all for as long as you believe in Scottish independence up here, you can kind of be anything underneath there. But so Nicola Sturgeon's managed to hold all those different groups together. The people there's the nutters who walk through the marches. There's the people who are just in it for the money, the payroll vote, and then there's the people who are who think the SNP is better or more competent than Westminster. But now she's gone. As someone else mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, so excuse me if I repeat myself, but it's like when the Godfather dies in the movies, his sons don't have all the same parts as he had. He embodies everything. So Sturgeon managed to keep it all together like the Godfather, as it were. But the sons don't. They only have a bit of each, a bit of the puzzle each.
And then there's a mad scramble, and then they all start carving up the city to their own little parts. And then instead of a big empire, they just end up with little wee cuts. And then in comes the next big guy, who then comes and sweeps it all up.
Well, that's right. Perhaps you're that.
We know how this works.
Yep. Perhaps you're that next big guy. But exactly, that's exactly what we're talking about here. And the fractured SNP is quite quite interesting, because I thought there was a really interesting part after the debate where Bernard Ponsonby basically said that he thought the party was split. Let's play that.
What did you make of it? What's your verdict?
Well, I said at the beginning there were really two audiences. They had...
Oops, what's going on here? Oh, it's not playing. Okay, some problem with that. The playback there, I don't know what it is. But basically, anyway, what he said was that the three candidates kind of represent three parties, almost, with Ash Regan representing the SNP, and they want to get independence at any cost. We already mentioned that. And then Kate Forbes representing this kind of the Tory party within the SNP, right? She wants financial, not austerity, that's not the right word, but financial controls and a kind of realistic approach to the challenges that the party faces in governance, right? But they, as Mary says, they're not actually all that interested in that. And then Humza Yousaf perhaps represents this progressive vote. But is he Labour? Let's say, anyway, for the purposes of the metaphor, let's make him Labour. He's appealing to youth vote. He's appealing to these progressive values and continuity as Sturgeon's successor. That's the named anointed one, as it were. So, you know, each one, even if they succeed, will inevitably split the party, because it's almost like a perfect thing. It's almost perfect, because they do embody these different parts, and then if one wins, they lose the other two parts, right? So, yep. So if Kate wins, she loses all the progressive folk and the people who are not interested in governance. Humza wins, he loses all the people interested in governance and the nutters in the streets. And then if Ash Regan wins, which she won't, but anyway, whatever, then she loses all the other ones. So it's quite fascinating, actually, almost to watch how almost perfect it is. Naveed, any more thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm more than happy to give Kate a job in the Tories. She can come with us.
Right.
Well, she can come home.
I think I'd have to interview her first, because I'd like to know where all the missing millions and billions are. And
absolutely.
I think Kate must know. She's been moving it around from one place to another.
Yeah. And you know, I read the media, and quite a lot of the newscasters and political reporters have all said similar sort of things. And yesterday it was a cat fight, right? That was not a debate. Supposedly, in all the closed door hustings that they've had up and down the country have been quite, nice and friendly.
They have, yes.
They've not been anything out there. But yesterday on TV, I think they realised, first time on telly, they've got to come out fighting. And Kate was in there.
She did.
You know, she was like right in there. She wasn't wasting any time. And even though Humza would have known she was going to come out with that, I don't think he had what he really needed. I mean, he said a few things that she's towards the right of the party, she's not progressive, but I don't think he had any sound bites that really would stick.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Yeah, because it is important to get the sound bites out, and I think it's maybe a bit of a challenge to fight. I mean, this is the problem they have, because anytime they fight, they're basically pulling themselves down, because, for example, Kate Forbes says, well, what about all this incompetence? And it's like, well, weren't you part of that government too? You
Absolutely.
know, I mean, we saw all this in the Tory leadership campaign as well, when they were knocking lumps out of each other, and it just destroyed trust in the party quite to some extent, right? Because people are like, well, you know, if you're fighting like this, I mean, if you're showing all your dirty laundry, then that's not really a particularly good look.
The thing was, yesterday they did not talk about the key issues that Conservatives are always on about. The things that are on the priority list of most Scots who are, as I said, living crisis is one thing, but their focus was all on independence, and they had an opportunity to talk about it. So, for example, Kate Forbes told us everything that Humza didn't do, but then didn't say how she would improve that, how she would fix those issues. Well, so it's great to say to Humza, you're crap at health, you're crap at transport, you're crap at justice, but she never turned around and says, if I was elected leader, I would do put this many police officers on, I would put this many new nurses on, I would find the money to ensure that social justice was sorted. But she never said any of that. And this is where we come down to, is it all just sound bites? And is Kate just saying this just to be different than Humza? But she was part of that exact same government and has been elected for many years, and she was the one with the money. So for the last 2 years since Derek Mackay's been away, so she knows how much money she can give to Humza on any of those portfolios for him to make things work. It all comes down to
he could just say, well, you didn't give me the money.
Yeah.
Right. You didn't give me the money. Right. That's one attack. I mean, just some stuff. But I think, although I think you're right, Humza wasn't expecting it wasn't quite enough prepared for it. He needed to have a bit more sound bites, and I think he was taken aback by the ferocity of.
I think that's what happened. I think he would have came with the same mindset of the last few weeks of hustings up and down the country and all the wee town halls that they were at, and I don't think he probably thought that she would come out with that, because she probably hasn't said it any time before, and I don't think he expected it at that time, and I think that's what threw him.
Well, we have another not hustings, another one tomorrow. It's going to be on Channel 4. This time it's going to be broadcast nationally, so the rest of the UK will get a chance to see what kind of nuttery is on display. I think I have to say, though, to whoever is probably not watching, but whoever thought of this cross-examination idea, what a genius idea that was in that context for that debate. Really, you got the whole thing going, and we will be.
It was lively.
Yes, we will be.
Somebody did a mashup yesterday, and it was so simple. It was virtually that clip where Kate's saying those three things to Humza, and all they did was they cut and pasted. This is a political broadcast by the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party.
Yes, well, talking about that, and you might not like this too much, but the Labour Party did exactly that. So I'll play that to roll out this section.
Independence.
I have to say, I'm not really hearing a plan here. I'm hearing let's just do everything the same again.
Well, Humza, you've had a number of jobs in government. When you were Transport Minister, the trains were never on time.
People don't have jobs to move into, and as a result, hollow out communities across Scotland.
When you were Justice Minister, the police were strained to breaking point.
I've got the patience for that.
I also want to have confidence.
I know you haven't had a public service delivery job.
And now, as Health Minister, we've got record high waiting times. 1 in 4 children are currently in poverty. They are going to bed hungry. They are going to bed cold tonight.
It's a disgrace that we're in this situation.
And it's not worked. No, it's not worked.
How can anybody trust you to stand up for the Scottish people?
Crisis when it comes to our public services and the cost of living.
And so far, none of you has told me how you're going to deliver it. None of you has told your membership how you're going to deliver it.
We've got to work on that central bank.
So you don't know how much that would cost.
More of the same is not a manifesto. It's an acceptance of mediocrity.
The SNP has lost its way.
It's time for change.
And I would put the last part in there to save you blushes. But I mean, that is the message for any whether it's Labour, Lib Dems, or Conservatives, basically to do that.
I don't think the Unionist parties could have paid even the brightest communications guys to come up with all that. That was like all our Christmases at once. They've done our job for the next 3 years or 4 years in the Scottish Parliament. This is them talking about each other. This is not Anna's talking against them. This is not Douglas talking about them. This is not the other parties. This is them talking against each other, who have sat on the cabinet with each other, and they have worked with each other, delivering on all those policies. And there's Humza saying, okay, you have never had a service delivery job. And are these the best in Scotland we've got to run the country?
Yeah, well, it's quite something, really, and it's just going to continue for another few weeks, isn't it? Until it comes.
I think the 12th is when they stop the debates.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's right. So 13th they can vote until 27th. So that's 2 weeks, and that's a couple of days. Yeah,
another 2 weeks.
Are they going to give us in between figures, or will the party not do that? Do you think it'll just be all in the ends?
No, it'll just be the end. Now,
I think it'll just be final results.
I put a post up yesterday, which was about the people who had what's the word, given endorsements. I think Humza Yousaf has by far the most endorsements.
Well, absolutely.
Double the endorsements of Kate Forbes, and of course all those people who gave Humza endorsements are now going out saying we shouldn't be doing this kind of thing in the party. Ash Regan, she only has one endorsement, which is Joanna Cherry. So we're going to move on. If you can, please subscribe to the show if you like what you hear. We're the only anti-nationalist show that goes out excuse me, on a weekly basis, and we love to have you with us. Please tell a friend, subscribe, whatever you can do to help us promote the show. We'll be back in a second. Right, so our discussion there went on a wee bit long, so we're just going to do some maybe short things that we noticed along the way during the week. The first was this, I mean, talking about Ash Regan, we have, and going into her plan, now we know, and regular viewers of the show will know that her plan is being, basically, she's regurgitating the plan, Wings Over Scotland's UDI plan. So I thought, well, why not? We'll have a quick look at that plan and we'll see what's behind it. So I trawled round through Wings postings, and we got this one here. And I'll just go through a little bit of it basically. But the idea is that if there's a vote of 50% plus one, the Scottish Government would immediately announce a technical declaration of independence, which is a fancy, not even a fancy name, but a weasel word for unilaterally declaring independence. They're going to demand the UK government open negotiations and appeal to the UN Charter to the international community for recognition. And you're like, well, just a few. I just wanted to bring up a few points about this, and this idea that they have some standing at the UN. Well, Nicola Sturgeon went to the Supreme Court, and the result of that failed experiment was that it was completely 100% undeniably stated by the court that the Scottish Government could not indulge in constitutional issues. So if they, how can they then go to the UN? Because the UN would just say, well, what basis have you done this thing? Did you do a referendum? And they go, no, we didn't do a referendum. We did a de facto referendum. And they go, okay. And they say, well, what standing do you have for this appeal? And they don't have a standing because basically, as Nicola Sturgeon made it unlawful. It was unlawful to begin with anyway. But the other thing I wanted to just mention about this was the idea of consent. This idea of the de facto referendum. And they think that the UK government will roll over, or that the people who voted to remain in the UK will just roll over when they say, when they do this de facto referendum. The idea that a general election can be treated as a referendum. And I think this comes down to something that I've seen, you see all the time in this Scottish nationalism, is that an unwillingness to accept losing. Right, so they lost two referendums, and they didn't lose the Brexit referendum, but basically they ignored that, and then they come up with these ideas that they're always going to that it's always they have no losers' consent. So the same thing as with this with this de facto referendum is the idea that they can do this without our consent. That's the weird thing. Mary, do you have any thoughts on this?
They're saying that they can do it without the majority's consent.
Well, they would say
we are the majority.
What they would say is that they have the majority of. If let's say they did get 50+1, they would say they've got a majority, right? But the thing is, it's not agreed beforehand. There's two parts to an election. One is that you have the loser's consent. Whoever loses it has to accept that they lose. And this is an amazing thing for mankind, the big development, Before that, it was whoever was the strongest took power, right? And now it's, by the ballot box, and whoever loses just goes, oh, I'm going home now. I'm going to do something else for a while. All right, we'll start fighting again in a week or two.
Yeah, but
right?
50% plus one of those who voted might actually mean much less than that. if the turnout is low. So you have to take the turnout into account. So if the turnout was only 50%, then that would mean that was only 25% of the voters deciding.
Right. So they've got 25% of the voters. Let's just say they've got less part of the voters, and then they're trying to say, and this election was a referendum, but we didn't consent to that. Right, that's another part of the consent. When you start an election, you say a general election is to elect the party of government. Right, it's not to do a referendum. A referendum is a different thing altogether. If we do a referendum, we'll agree all about that beforehand. So this is this idea that they just don't want people's consent. It's a kind of authoritarianism, really, where they just say, well, we don't really care what you think, we're just going to do it, which leads me to say, well, if they don't care about all that and they want this 50 point plus one and a low turnout and all that, well, why don't they just declare UDI now? Right? Yeah. They can just declare it now and say, we're Scotland's independent, but they can't because no one's.
I spoke to quite a few SNP supporters and voters of late, and they've all said one thing, that now is not the time for independence. There is too many other things to worry about. And this is SNP supporters and voters, and they have been for many years. So that was interesting because before it went hand in hand. But I think of late, with so much going on, I don't think the public, especially with the cost of living crisis and coming after COVID, they're thinking, now's not the time. I don't think their electorate, their voters, are ready for independence. This might be a thing of their MSP.
That's a good point.
Well, the leadership don't seem to have got that message, that the supporters would rather that they dealt with the more important issues first before they go on about independence.
There was a poll just come out, and before the show's aired, it's here. Support for Indy Ref 2 next year is collapsing, with opposition to it growing even amongst 2019 SNP voters. +6 would oppose a referendum on Scottish independence being held in the next year. So it's declining there because they know they're onto a loser at the moment. That's the thing, right? So it's.
But what else do they have, Mark? They have nothing else to keep their troops together. If it wasn't for that, they're virtually a split party, as it has seen with the 3 leadership contestants. Yeah. If they don't have that independence umbrella over everybody to say, listen, doesn't matter if there's potholes on the roads, doesn't matter if the kids are starving, doesn't matter if you're cold, doesn't matter if there's no jobs, doesn't matter if the motorways are closed and everything else that's going on, the attainment gap, education, health. Who cares if there's people lying on the hospital beds in emergency for 13 hours, right? As long as we've got independence to work towards. When the minute the people come away from that thought thinking, do you know what? No, we are worried about all those things that affect our life. This is when they're going to start breaking. And it started 15 years or so of an upward trajectory and being in power. There has to be a time where, the public are going to start recognizing that this has been a fallacy, really. It's been a fraud to us, and we're never going to be able to do that. I mean, can we touch on Ash Regan's, made me laugh almost, where she said that they would have a central bank within a couple of months.
Oh, it's such a nonsense.
A couple of months, a central bank with a brand new currency.
If you don't know what a central bank is, then that might seem achievable.
Well, that's true, and some people have said that. Some people just say, "Well, we've got Scottish notes already. How difficult can it be?"
And credit cards, of course.
Yeah, I mean that's true. And Emma Harper, of course,
she's got credit cards.
Is one of those. Okay. I saw one of those posts just the other day. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
Is that the Bank of Scotland debit card with the bridges on it and the Forth Road Bridge on it and the Glasgow skyline and stuff?
Real Scottish,
cards, yeah.
That's Scottish currency.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, their very best plan for independence through Ash Regan is this completely unworkable idea of, it's basically unilateral declaration of independence and try to get international support. But there's nothing there actually. And it's frustrating, I think, because sometimes you get a journalist who'll say, and which happened maybe a week and a half ago, where the guy says, but what if the UK government says no? And usually the person will, misdirect or deflect the question. But that person was able to ask over and over and over. And that when you get to that point, you realise that there's nothing there, actually. And they're just going along on running on empty. I mean, I just think when they get to this end point, Regan's not going to get elected, but what happens then? Where are there?
There's going to be an epic meltdown, isn't there?
Well, Mark, the thing is, right, we know that Regan's not going to be elected, but she still has a vote bank. She still has people who believe her ideas, people who are sharing her ideas on social media, people who are sticking by her. And you will see she won't get anywhere near the votes that other two candidates will get, but you will see that when the figures come out, she will get votes, and be that 2,000, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 of that vote bank, there will be people that vote for her. I mean, the EU alone have said there's no automatic entry for Scotland, and Scotland, having the economy that it does, would be a net payer into the EU. They would not get anything back. So you want to join a bloc where you're going to automatically have to pay hundreds of millions or even billions, depending on Scotland's economy at the time. So what would be their benefit of joining the EU to pay in?
Well, and also it's automatic, isn't it? Now they've made it so that if it was independence, it would be automatically into the EU. So they're kind of a hostage to fortune on what actually happens in the EU over the next few years. Who knows with that, what about that? It's a bit of a dead end. I think, as you said, when people realise it's a dead end, and they've been trying to kick the can down the road so that they never get to that. But now they are at the dead end, very, very close to it. And especially if Ash Regan gets canned, which is going to happen, then they've really got nowhere to go. They could maybe go to Alba, but it's that's not going to work. Alba might get a few percentage points extra, but they're not going to become a viable electoral force. So we're just in the countdown, aren't we? Really, for that to happen. Great discussion on that part. Next up, Mary is going to talk about why the Greens have to go. Well, we all know that, but let's get a few details of that.
Okay, so it's actually, it's only been 18 months since the SNP entered the power sharing arrangement with the Scottish Greens, and since Lorna, Slater and Patrick Harvey were appointed as Scottish ministers. We all know the SNP, they needed the Greens for support for votes, but in return they had to implement some of the Greens' policies and their harebrained schemes. But my question is, did they have to give the Greens so much? And it's actually quite amazing how the Greens have been able to wreak so much havoc in such a short time. There's not a day goes by without headlines crying out about one crisis or another that has been perpetrated and fueled by the naive, short-sighted, badly implemented, expensive and downright dangerous policies of the Scottish Greens. So they have to go.
Well, how do they go? I think that's the question, isn't it, Mary? Where are they? The only way is to get rid of them, right? Humza Yousaf is going to get rid of them, and he's the most likely winner. So they're going to continue on their crazy schemes.
Well, Humza has said that he would. He basically said that he would keep the alliance with the Greens. Ash said that the Greens wouldn't work with her. And Kate said that she would work with the Greens, but only if they accepted her terms. But, how can they look at what's been going on in Scotland? They know what's been going on. So how can they allow, for example, the Scottish Greens to wreak havoc for Scottish businesses with this half-baked bottled deposit return scheme?
Well, it's not even half-baked. Quarter-baked.
That's being generous to them, I would say. You've got the drinks manufacturers, the distributors, the retailers, and next it's going to be us, the consumers, that are going to suffer with this, right? So that's businesses are getting hammered by the Greens. You've got the housing crisis, which is continuing. I've reported on this at length before, but it's continuing to get worse due to their ill-conceived rent freezes and no evictions policies that they have, which is making things much, much worse in social housing in Scotland. And all the landlords are selling their properties and getting out of the business. But as Naveed pointed out at the beginning, they want to keep welcoming more refugees into Scotland, and there isn't enough houses for them. So the problem is getting worse and worse.
Yeah, the thing that's amazing to me is that why they're just in the news all the time is negative stuff. And there never seems to be any positive stuff about the Greens. So why would you keep them in, especially when you don't need them anymore to get your referendum bill passed? I don't understand that. Any thoughts on this, Naveed?
Absolutely. The Greens, honestly, as you said, right, I'm not going to repeat what you've said on what each candidate has said about them. Now, but I do think one thing, right, see, after the hammering the Greens have got, this will be, I think in the past, Nicola indulged them. with everything and anything they wanted, right? I think with everything that's happened, so Ash, they don't want to work with her. Kate virtually doesn't want to work with them, but she would take them on board if they just listened.
She doesn't really want to work with them.
She doesn't want them.
Yeah, Hamza essentially will work with them, but I think Hamza's going to have a leash on them now. I think anything they come to Hamza with, it will be a lot more controlled, a lot more streamlined, because he realises how much grief that the party is getting because of the Greens. So he'll keep them on board, but it'll really be in a reduced capacity. That's my personal opinion, because he'll now have the cards on his side by saying, well, I'm the only one that wanted to take you on board. You know, I've worked with you, so you need to give me a bit of slack here.
Why do you think Sturgeon let them have so many of their policies implemented?
It was her last term, right? And she didn't have the majority she needed. Without having that Butte House agreement, she could have been on every single bill, having to go in with begging hand to the rest of the parties.
Or begging to the Greens constantly, even, I suppose.
Yeah,
just putting them in. But I mean, there's one thing it's one thing to put them in. It's another to let them have free reign over a bunch of policies. Of course, I think that
two junior ministers.
Nicola Sturgeon agrees with them. That's right. And I've said all along that she would actually probably rather have Patrick Harvey as the next leader of the SNP than any of these three people. So, you know, because that's where her mind was, I think. And that's why she gave them the free reign, perhaps.
See, Mary, back to your bottle return scheme. Honestly, see the amount of complaints. I mean, small craft brewers, small ones with just like a little pub and a wee brewery in the back, they're looking at costs of around £10,000 to be part of the scheme. Bigger craft brewers who are small businesses, essentially, they're looking at about £100,000 on this scheme, which is a phenomenal amount of money coming out of the pandemic, new products and everything going on. A bottle of water, for example, 24-pack bottle of water, which you can get for about £3 if it's not branded, is going to go up to £7.80 overnight, because 20 times 24, £4.80. The pack's only costing £3. With the cost of living crisis, I buy water for the kids to go to school every day, and that's exactly what I pay, about £3.50 for a 24-pack. Am I now going to be paying, what, £8-9 for that pack?
It's crazy.
And you're going to have to store all those bottles and then take them back to get your
and then hope that the machines are
back.
working.
And hope they can read the barcode that's on there.
Absolutely. And hope that the machine is working and hope to get it back. Honestly, I don't know. I don't have an answer, but the scheme needs stopped. Needs totally
most of the candidates have already said that they would actually halt the system, or they would put it. I think Humza said that he would delay it for at least a year.
Lorna
and the other
said just
two
the other day in
said they would
Parliament.
pause it.
Yeah, that we're paying the highest amount in anywhere in the world. Well, so it's because we've got the highest costs anywhere in the world, so you're not paying anything extra compared to that. Those schemes work in those countries because they've been geared up from a long, long time, not just being brought in. Just because you tell somebody, and Circularity Scotland, I mean, they're a joke in their own right, or it's a non-profit organisation. This has all been tied up and sold up. Somebody's going to be making money.
Certainly.
The company in Circularity Scotland seemed to be a polluter in their own right, the parent company of them.
Oh my goodness. Can I ask you, because the Greens are also responsible for the transport crisis, they basically wanting all the cars off the road and everyone using bikes and public transport, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. But have you had a lot of people complaining about the LEZ zone in Glasgow?
Absolutely. Now, put it this way, anybody with a diesel car older than 2014, 2015, I mean, that's
includes
only
us.
a 5 or 6, includes one of my cars as well. That's only 5 or 6 year old cars, which have got plenty of life left in them. But a petrol car from about 2006 onwards will work. Pushing people to electric cars, we don't have the infrastructure for electric chargers. If you go to town now, you'll see them all broken down, covers on them, or just missing. You can't get into the city centre. Electric car prices are absolutely astronomical. It's the price of a mortgage now to get an electric car. How do they? This is disproportionately affecting the poor. Those little people who would buy a little wee diesel car, a couple of grand, and run it for a year or two, and then go and buy another one, because that's all the budget they've got. They're working in
it's also better
job.
to recycle the cars as well. It's so frustrating. I was looking at a website today. It was something about grants to upgrade the car. Now I looked at the price in Auto Trader for my car. And then what I would need to replace it with is a model. I've got 213 Peugeot 3008, and it would have to be replaced with 2016. So basically, that's £3,000 difference in cost difference, right? So, and then I saw this thing on the internet. It's like, oh, you can get grants. This is great. You can get a £3,000 grant. And I looked at it, and it was like, we can get a £3,000 grant for scrapping your car, and you get £2,000 for scrapping it, and £1,000 for buying a cargo bike. You know, like
I'm going to replace the van with a cargo bike.
Replace my car with a cargo bike? Whoever even thought that was a reasonable idea? Even if I actually had a van that was going to be scrapped, I still wouldn't replace it with. You imagine the plumber coming along in his cargo bike. You're like, well, that's insanity.
Equipment.
If it was an actual grant, 3,000, I'd go fine. That would be exactly right. But no. It's just,
when you see those people in Thailand and in Vietnam and countries when they've got everything all piled up. You've got 5 kids on the bike and they've got all the stuff or in India. It'll be like that in Scotland.
Even with the bike lanes in Glasgow, they put those hedgehogs, and somebody's obviously made a fortune in making them, producing them, and then getting them put onto the roads. Half of them are now missing. We don't even wear the hedgehog. We call them the hedgehogs. They're now missing. They're not there. Half those roads, you were lucky to see a couple of bikes. Now, city centre's different, but once you go sort of towards the West End, towards the east, to the other side, you barely see a cyclist.
We go past one.
We
go past one a lot, and it's really frustrating because it takes us. We pick up our kids here at university in Glasgow. It took me 13 minutes to get in the other day. If I had tried that in public transport, I wouldn't be able to.
It'd take you an hour just to get in.
Yeah, take an hour. Yeah, just to get in. So 2 hours.
That's if the bus comes.
Right, if it's just not possible to do these idealistic schemes. People, the real people here involved. It's terrible. Now we're probably going to run a little bit over because we still have.
Right. Well, I'll finish up on this
part of the week. So Mary, you finish up on this.
I'm basically just going to say that Scotland cannot afford the Greens, and they have got to go.
They do.
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully they will go. Things you can do to support the show. You can do a donation. We didn't talk about donations, but we have a fundraising drive for 2023. Please, you can go to our website, and I'm not going to click the wee button, but just go there. There's a donate thing. It would be really great if you could do that. Times are fairly tough, but we can amplify our voice for you. And have great guests in, like Naveed, who's been really great, and who earlier, I saw you get some fan mail there. Alan Jack said that you had a great voice. Naveed, there you go.
Thank you.
So that's good. You can also buy T-shirts. New ones are coming soon. And please subscribe to the show. Coming up is the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week. Right, Mary, you're up.
Well, I thought today we were starting with the viewers' Zoomer of the Week, Mark.
Okay.
Would you like to do that?
Okay, then I will start with the Zoomer, the viewers' Zoomer. So this week, because David isn't here, he's coming back next week. We've got a viewers' Zoomer of the Week, which I asked for on Twitter. And so, as proposed by Marco Polo from Twitter, we're going to have Nicola Sturgeon grandstanding on Women's Day. I'll get a little bit of this online. Just give me a second. Okay, there we go. Let's see what she's saying. Well, I'll just...
Happy International Women's Day to everyone here. International Women's Day is a moment of celebration, but it is also one of reflection. We rejoice in the achievements of women and women's organisations here in Scotland and indeed across the world. We mark progress towards gender equality, but we also, on this day, remind ourselves of how much more still needs to be done.
Right, whatever. Anyway, rather than bore you with Nicola Sturgeon, we'll try to get rid of Nicola Sturgeon, not see more of her. Get rid of her. She's gone. I mean, would this be the same Nicola Sturgeon who put a male rapist into a women's prison?
And the same Nicola Sturgeon who can't tell us if a rapist is a man or a woman?
Or the same Nicola Sturgeon who ignored feminist groups who were worried about those two issues?
And the same Nicola Sturgeon who did not propose any feminist legislation at all during her 8 years in office.
And the same Nicola Sturgeon who had to resign because she couldn't do any of the above. So for this tedious grandstanding, we nominate, the viewers have nominated Nicola Sturgeon as Zoomer of the Week. Okay. We'll come back in a second with the next one. Yeah, you were right. That one was the first one. I don't know what happened there. But anyway.
Don't worry about it. Okay. Well, my Zoomer of the week is Greens Minister Lorna Slater, who I think most of the viewers actually, probably most of them voted for Lorna Slater for the embarrassment that she has brought to Scotland and the Scottish government. And she was attempting to blame Alistair Jack and the UK government for her own drinks deposit return scheme fiasco. Last week, she stood up in Holyrood and she claimed that Alistair Jack had misled Parliament when he said that he hadn't received any formal request for the exemption from the UK Internal Market Act for her DRS. So basically, you need to ask for an exemption if you're trying to do something in Scotland that's different from other countries, because producers in Scotland would be at a disadvantage. So she gave a big lecture and she said she'd already applied for the exemption with her party. So she even went on to ask she wanted Alistair Jack's resignation. She wanted him to resign, or she wanted him to be sacked by Rishi Sunak. But in an about turn, it turns out that the Scottish government have only applied for the exemption today. So it was all lies. So basically, she has misled the Scottish Parliament.
So shall we ask for her resignation then on this topic?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Do you have any dealings with the Greens in Scottish Parliament, Naveed?
Poor Patrick Harvey sits on his own whenever you see him. Doesn't even have any buddies. I always wonder, being a party leader, you'd have like a whole troop of people around you, but this chap sits on his own, so there's not much else to say. I don't know if you've seen the Parliament live just the other day. Lorna Slater was asked by every single Parliament. They all said, can you give us a yes or no? Did Circularity Scotland liaise with you on this topic about, I think it was about, I can't remember what the subject was. It was either the delay in the Times, or they all asked her, Labour asked her, her own party asked her, Conservatives asked her. Not once did she give a straight answer. They said yes or no, and all she did was, I will repeat again, just that, she just read a line. It made no sense. Really, so just wanted to ask. She kept on saying, they're a private individual company and they're not answerable to me. And they all said, did they talk to you? Did they discuss with you? Did they meet with you? She could not give a straight answer. And when when they don't give a straight answer, you always know the answer's no. And if she says no, she'd be embarrassed.
Of course.
It's terrible.
I don't know why she's still in a job. She has to go first out of the Greens.
Yes, they're a bit of a disaster, really. Okay, next one coming up. Right, well, okay, so last one of the three is going to be Transport Minister Jenny Gilruth for stopping the £35 million network support grant for buses at the end of this month, which will mean hundreds of bus routes will have to be cut.
And fares will have to go up as well.
Well, it wasn't this. Weren't they going to nationalise all the stuff? I mean, this comes on top of the 300 million that this free bus scheme has cost. Now, I'm pretty certain that a lot of that 300 million is being diverted to companies' owners' bank accounts. But that's just my own thoughts on the matter, because free money, from the government, that's what they want. I wonder how much they lobbied for that. Anyway, nonetheless, bus services slumped 25% already.
Over the last 10 years, I think it's about 25%.
And the grant was introduced during the pandemic to help with pandemic stuff. But, since then we've had cost of living crisis, so rises in the cost of fuel, energy, wage costs, and so on. And many communities are already cut off from the public transport network. I mean, maybe it's not so bad here, but in other areas, if you have to rely, they always say, we'll go green, it's great, but the whole thing is you need a proper public transport network, and that is very, very expensive to do right, and it's never really worked in this country all that well, to be honest, apart from maybe the London Underground.
Well, Jenny Gilruth was the one, she herself said previously, she said, for our health, our climate and our communities, we will continue to support our bus industry and encourage the shift away from cars and towards sustainable public transport. Right. And now she's cancelling the £35 million grant.
Oh, yes.
No. Naveed, this must be affecting the people with the lowest income the most, right?
As always, all the policies that the SNP brings out always affect those and the lower, earnings. But then what they do is, once they've done that, rising costs and everything, then they'll come out with, we'll give you 20 quid extra to the kids, £30, we'll give you £15 for less than 20. It just goes in a circle. So they rise the costs for everybody across the board, and then a small minority of people who essentially are always the vote bank of the SNP because they're on handouts. But people who are hardworking, working 2 jobs, 3 jobs to make ends meet, there's nothing for them. So if you're going to work every single day and you're working 5 days a week and you've got to get the bus there and bus back, just think of that. Even another £5 on that, that's 20 quid a month. Times that, by the rest of the year. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And, the bus scheme for the young kids, that has been a success in the sense of that there is a lot more kids, but the buses by no means are filled up right now. So you'd imagine that all these people would go on to buses. No, the trains have been on strike more than you can think of. You don't even want to look towards a train now because you never know if one's going to turn up or not.
Oh, that's true.
They're not reliable.
We lived in Japan for a long time. Trains extremely reliable there, and
to the second almost.
Yes, very, very rare. But they have a culture built up of centuries almost of that type of dedication to the service. That's not the way it works here.
Mark, just on that point, see when you're saying that, just on that point, and see when they come out with these schemes like the bike schemes, the electric schemes, and the eco schemes, they compare us to the best in the business countries. They compare us to Norway, Denmark, Belgium, Sweden, countries that have been doing this for
centuries, almost,
basically
competent countries.
They've built in this right from day one. We're going from the opposite way. You can't just instantly emulate the best in the business. It should be done step by step. It should be done slowly. It can't just be done cut off date this and it's going from from 0 to 100 overnight. And that's what
I said that before, is that there's this desire to make Scotland world leading without actually doing the actual groundwork to make it to do that. Absolutely. It takes a lot of it takes a lot of education, and it takes a lot of maybe mindset change in many ways to run things like that, or maybe just an understanding that people that we're not the same people as the Norwegians or the Japanese or the Icelandic people or whatever it is. And let's just be good at what we do.
Yeah, I will say government has to take society with them. They have to take people with them. They have to take businesses, education, and the wider buy-in of the majority of the population. You can't just enforce rules and put rules on people. Simple things like the stupid bottle scheme is going to cost you instantly. It's going to get on a fiver on a 24-pack of anything. Just under a fiver.
Ridiculous.
Absolutely
right, so Naveed, you're to choose. There were 3 Zoomers. There was Nicola Sturgeon for her grandstanding on Women's Day, Jenny Gilruth for the transport thing, and Lorna Slater for the Alistair Jack fiasco.
I would say it's got to be Lorna Slater for me.
Yeah, Lorna Slater. That's a good choice.
Yeah, I think the viewers will agree with that.
Yes,
that's what they're voting for.
And I just can't stand to watch her on the Parliament TV, which just stands up, I've been in talks, and you just think this is just rubbish. Why are you even doing this? And why is this person who hardly get any votes, a minister in the government? They should be at the back of the bus. I don't know.
She's an embarrassment to Scotland.
It's really terrible. It's a shame. It's a shame. Anyway, we're going to close up now. So if you can, it would be great if you can donate to the show if you like what we see. We will also, what else have we got here? Big thank you to our friends at UK Union Voice and United Against Separation Facebook pages for helping to promote the show.
And thank you, everyone, for your comments tonight. They've been great. Thank you.
And a huge thank you to Naveed for joining us tonight. It's been our pleasure having you on the show, and we do hope you will come back again and see us soon.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure being on, and thank you very much to the viewers for listening and for all the lovely comments. And absolutely. Thanks for you guys for calling.
Thanks, Naveed.
That's great. Pleasure. Okay, so we will see you next week for the next instalment. And there was supposed to be a thought of the day, but we'll just leave that as we've already run over.
Plenty thoughts.
All right. So thanks, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone. Good night.